Welcome to your next breakout session. This is diving into the data, Unilever's journey of understanding its customers. I'm delighted to introduce Connie Kim, who is the VP of Technology, Strategy, and Business Development at Unilever Prestige, where Connie focuses on identifying the most innovative and advanced ways of implementing the fastest moving and most relevant trends across the prestige beauty brands. Could I have a round of applause for Connie?
Hi. Oh, is this working? Hi, guys. So good to see such a large crowd. I actually thought there was only going to be 10 people in here, but this is great. So yes, I'm Connie Kim. I work for Unilever Prestige. We're a small collection of beauty brands within Unilever. I work for technology operations. I have like a really long title, but technically I just do technology operations. What that means is anything that's related to technology. So you can think of ERP, CRM, CDP, e-commerce, even technology that interfaces with our customers, that all falls within my scope. So it's a pretty big agenda, but it's been really exciting. So there's me. That's my contact if you guys have any other questions. So I am based in Dermalogica, so don't be confused. That's just one of our brands. The Unilever office is actually not located in Los Angeles, so we have to anchor on one of the brands. So today, I wanted to keep the conversation very light, be really informative, keep it an open discussion. So if you have any questions throughout, please just ask away. This is not something formalized. Pretty honest and direct with my answers, and I'll try to help out as much as I can. So I'm going to start by describing the difference between Unilever and Unilever Prestige. I don't think it's very well known what those two differences are. And then we'll jump right into the challenge that I faced as soon as I started at this company, which is what does our customer data environment look like? And then I'll look at the ideal setup. If in the perfect world I was able to set up the solution that I wanted, what would it look like based off of my previous experience and what I've seen in the industry? And then I'll go into reality. What does the actual solution look like today for us? And then what is our hope for that future as we continuously work to get there? And then please ask questions as we go through. Okay, let's get into it. Also, my presentation isn't meant to be very beautiful. It's just to help highlight what I'm trying to say. So don't judge me based off my slides. So I'm pretty sure everyone's familiar with Unilever. Is there anyone who doesn't know what Unilever is? It's okay if you don't, because I actually didn't know what Unilever was until maybe like 8 years ago. And at that point, it was described like, oh, we own Dove, we own Schmidt's, we own Vaseline. So that's kind of what Unilever is. So initially, when I first was approached with this opportunity at Unilever, it wasn't very exciting to me, because why would I want to work at a company that's hundreds of years old and it comes from like the soap space? Like, that's not my background. But Unilever Prestige is a little bit different. We're a collection of 8 very prestige beauty brands. I'll go a little bit more into detail on what those brands are. But I wanted to highlight here is when you think of a customer or a company like Unilever, we have over 400 brands in our portfolio. You would think that everyone has the same marching orders. We're all under the same ERP. We're all under the same email service provider. And there's very little flexibility into how you can go from one partner to another. So that rigidness was a little bit something I was nervous about, thinking about Unilever as a whole. But that one little blue guy within this big family of Unilever is Unilever Prestige. So we have the independence to do anything we want in terms of within reason to really work outside of what Unilever normally mandates as its operations. So on the right-hand side is kind of my illustration of how our brands work. So within our brands, we have Dermalogica, Murad, Ren Skincare, Living Proof, Garancia, Hourglass Cosmetics, Kate Somerville, and now Tatcha. So I'm sure you're familiar with some of these brands. Some people are like, oh, Hourglass is my favorite, or Living Proof, which is literally just down the street, is one of my favorites. So hopefully everyone has a favorite. I'll take 2 minutes just to talk about my 2 favorite products, because that's kind of my role. We should always be about brand awareness. My number one favorite product of all time, if you're curious, is Ren Skincare's Night Recovery Balm. So anyone out there who is trying to try one of our products, please try the Night Recovery Balm. It's my personal secret on how to stay looking young. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but just assume that I'm 100 years old. Ren Skincare is really working for me. My second favorite product is Living Proof's Detox Shampoo. So if you put hairspray, clay or anything else in your hair, pollution, definitely, if you don't think pollution is affecting you, it definitely is. All you have to use is detox once a week, and you're good to go. That's my shameless plug. Please try these products. So essentially what we do at Unilever Prestige is each of these brands work very independently. So Living Proof, Hourglass, Murad, we don't really market that they're part of Unilever because we don't want people to associate it necessarily with Unilever. We want people to think these are fresh brands, independent, agile. They can pretty much do whatever they want and test things faster. So that's why I really took this role and went running with it. And that's how we're here working with Klaviyo, to be honest. So I made sure that some of them were colored the same because it's not necessarily that each of the brands can do every single thing that they want to do independently. There are some ways that we work very well together. So say, for an example, ERP systems. It doesn't necessarily make sense for there to be 8 different ERP systems. Maybe NetSuite makes sense for our smaller, more startup-y brands. Oracle might work for our bigger brands, but that's where we kind of make a decision on what makes sense for one independent brand and what makes sense for the brands as a whole. So that's kind of the difference between Unilever and Unilever Prestige. So I want to make it clear that everything else I'm going to talk about going forward specifically talks about Unilever Prestige. But if you have any questions about how things work at Unilever, I can definitely speak to that as well. So the challenge, this is actually my inbox. So, no judgment. And also no judgment on Pottery Barn. I'm a big Pottery Barn fan, as you can see. But the example here and what I want to show is, look how frequently I'm getting my emails from Pottery Barn. And it's Pottery Barn Kids. It might even be this reward system. I'm getting emails multiple times a day. And all throughout the day. So I took this screenshot in the morning, but even throughout the rest of the day, I was still getting more emails from Pottery Barn. So you might look at this and think, this is terrible. This is a terrible email campaign. This person is getting emailed way too many times. But who's to say that that's wrong or right? Maybe that works for me. Clearly, it probably does, because I'm opening these emails and that's being recorded, and then they're like, she's opening these emails, let's just continue to send them to her. And then I'm buying things, and so it's clearly working. So this is just an example of how one schema works. This is also my inbox, different email service provider. So Hourglass is our other one of our brands. So you can see a little bit here, hard to tell, but the email frequency is much lower. So they email me less frequently, and then the emails that they're sending me are a little bit different. So again, this is not necessarily showing that this is a good or bad or a different way. It's just showing that the tactics that go behind email campaigns are wildly different based off of the customer user. And I just want to show these different cases because the challenge really goes to show, what does our customer data look like? How do we know to send emails at this frequent rate or at this frequent rate? How do we know how to do that? So when I initially came to Unilever Prestige and I started looking at all the obstacles, literally within the first 30 days, my boss said, can you do an audit of all the 8 brands and tell me the 5 biggest challenges we have? And I had 30 days to do it. One of the biggest things that came up was we don't really necessarily know our customers very well. And a lot of the brands were saying that they were doing batch and blast emails, that they were sending campaigns across everyone. They were sending maybe concealer to someone who doesn't need concealer. They were sending detox shampoo to someone who might not have any hair. It could have been wildly different like that. So we really didn't have a good grasp of our customer data. So that was one of the first challenges I wanted to tackle. So what it seemed like at the time when we were looking at our vast information of customer database was that everyone had a very unique customer database. So this is kind of how we slotted out the prestige brands. We have 6 skincare brands, 1 hair care, 1 color cosmetic. And it felt like every brand, when I spoke to them individually, would say, our people are different. Like, our customers are different than skincare 2. Our customers are very unique than hair care 1. And so they wanted to keep everything very separately and do everything unique. But as I started looking at sample data, really understanding the little segments that we were able to pull together, it actually looked more like the right side. So instead of categorizing it by skincare, by hair care, or color cosmetics, or whatever category you could potentially have, let's look at their spending behavior, their interaction, their engagement, and really understand their behavior at that top level. So then, just hypothesis, really just shooting this out, I thought that it looked more like the right-hand side. You have your loyalists, you have your occasional buyers, you have your adventurers, and then you have your tough critics. And there are probably a whole slew of other names that you could call these different segments. But what I understood was it wasn't like it was a very Sisyphean task where you can't tackle it. You don't have to personalize every single campaign to each individual person. You could actually very realistically break it down into smaller segments and make it feel like it was very personalized. And a small anecdote here is one of the things that we were thinking about is highly personalized products. So right now, really popular in this space is if you get a bottle of shampoo that says, Connie's shampoo, made specifically for her. This is the scent that she loves, and this is exactly the ingredients that are made for her particular hair. And when it comes in the mail, I think, wow, there was a shampoo elf somewhere in some forest who's magically created this for me, and I will spend $100 for this magical shampoo. And people were raving, right? You love it when your name is on something. And so we gathered together as brands and we thought, oh my God, how are we gonna compete with this market? The supply chain alone is a disaster. So we were worried that we're gonna have to continuously challenge ourselves to compete with these smaller startup-y brands who had these elves that were able to make this shampoo continuously. But what we figured out was, actually, if you looked at 10,000 customers, 100,000 customers, even 1,000 customers, you didn't have 1,000, 10,000, or 100,000 permutations of that shampoo. You really actually had 8. And you could create that 8, and then you could write people's names on those 8 bottles, and it would really feel highly personalized. So that's kind of what I took as an example for how to break down our customer database challenge. It wasn't like we had to create these 10,000 different permutations. We just had to figure out what that 8 looked like. So I thought about it. What would be the ideal solution? And previous to Unilever, I worked at this other company, and they're very good about confidentiality. They don't like sharing anything behind their walls. So let's just refer to them as Huli. I used to work at this company called Huli. And we had so much access to engineers, to data scientists. Pretty much everything under the sun was an option for us. And so I worked on their AdWords and digital advertising space. What we were able to do there was we had a massive database. From day one, they had been collecting all of their customer information. Almost unbeknownst to them, they had amassed something like 11+ million customer information. But they weren't necessarily, they didn't even know what they had until like recently. But what they did have was the wherewithal to know that we could really turn this into a really strong data science project. So what they did was they had the world-renowned statisticians, like you have PhDs from Harvard and whoever, and they would come and look at our customer data and say, this is the email you should send. And you need to send it at 8:38 a.m. because I know exactly what time everyone's gonna open their emails because I'm a data scientist and I know everything. And so it was actually really interesting because for someone like me who loves data, who loves when data tells me the answers, I was like, great, that's what we're gonna do. 8:38, this email's going out. But it wasn't that simple. So what we did was we then partnered with our marketing experts. Again, top of the line marketing experts who knew I would talk to them. I'm not a detail-oriented person. They would say, this blue is different than this blue because it's just a little bit lighter. And you can't even call it blue. Like, that's offensive to marketing people. And I said, okay, I can't even tell the difference. And they're like, oh, but we ran an A/B test, and this one is the one. And so we would have these different A/B tests that we ran wildly, constantly across this 11 plus million customer base. And so with our marketing team giving us these amazing marketing content with different color schemes, different words, different everything. And then our data statisticians who would then help us gather that data and tell us exactly what to do. It made it very easy for our e-commerce teams to then take those two insights and present this wonderfully packaged marketing campaign. And that is the ideal solution, to be honest. If we were able to have those data statisticians and those marketers and this wonderful e-commerce strategy, then sending out emails would be a no-brainer. We can do that very easily. And it just helped that Hooli owned their own email service provider. So essentially, we could do whatever we wanted. But again, this is the ideal setup. 99.999% of the economy or in our industry, we don't have access to this. If we're lucky, we'll have a really great marketing person. If we're lucky, we'll have one data scientist. And if we're lucky, we'll have one really great e-commerce person. So that's just a reality. So even coming from somewhere like Unilever, we were handling or tackling the same challenges I'm sure you guys are all seeing today. So then it really came down to what's real life? What can we actually do today that would make a lot of sense? So I know this is a little complicated, but this is exactly what the world looks like in my point of view as we see it today. We do have a customer database, but it's a lot of fragmented information. And this is not saying that there's anything wrong with this. This is just real life. So we have our e-commerce database, our loyalty database, our ERP system, our point of sale, any other slew of places that you have point of contacts with your customer, that is fed into your database. Or if you don't have a database at all, that's totally fine. A lot of startups or smaller companies don't have the resources or funding to invest in a CDP or a customer database. So you can just focus on your e-commerce database. That alone is a wealth of information. That e-commerce would then feed into a really robust email service provider, which today we work with Klaviyo. And that email service provider would then help with all of that personalization, would help with your A/B testing, would help with your metrics, would help segment the information that you're seeing in this e-commerce database. And then your marketing team would then be able to use those kinds of information and send out campaigns, test things out, and figure out, is it really 8:38 where you should be sending out this email? Or does it really vary on those 8 different segments that we were talking about earlier? So this is actually, in real life, what we're doing today. And it varies by each of our brands, but the core solution still is we're using our e-commerce database as our sole place of information for our customer information. And the reason why I thought that Klaviyo was such a good partner in this environment is that I'm sure that as you guys have looked at your ESP providers, you've gone through all the very common providers in the market. The reason why I liked Klaviyo quite a bit, hands down, was their user interface. So there are other, I don't want to bash any other ESPs, but a lot of times ESPs aren't necessarily developed with the user in mind. They look at the back-end operations, and that's great. I think back-end operations is very important. But when I talked to these brands and really got familiar with them, what I learned was that it was actually the marketing teams that were using ESPs. And marketing teams aren't necessarily trained very technically. Like, you can't ask a marketing person to know how to type out SQL series and codes. Like, they won't know how to do that. So it's very important for that user interface within your ESP to be very, very simple. And I thought that Klaviyo was by far one of the best I've ever seen. So that way you can get your marketing teams to be very receptive to something like Klaviyo. And then once they're very receptive to it, they can then use it to the benefit of the company. So what we're doing now is we're connecting to Klaviyo to our e-commerce database and really testing it out, seeing how the metrics are. And truth be told, within the past year, maybe 6 months to a year, I would say that 3 out of our 8 brands are on Klaviyo. And they've been testing it out. We've been really improving it. The Klaviyo team has been really great about holding our hands and answering all of our questions, and we have very many of them. So it's been a really great journey. But this is how we see ourselves today. If you ask me what the future looks like and what we're getting to is this. This is my dream state. So the reason why I have 8 different boxes in this unified database is because I actually want 8 brands of our data to sit in one unified database. So we have a big project running this year leading into 2020, and it's for our customer database platform. This is like a new catchphrase across the industry. We're very lucky to be able to have a partner that's willing to work within our budget, holding our hands yet once again, and really testing out this space for us because it's brand new. And again, because we're Unilever Prestige and not necessarily Unilever, we're able to test these things out in a very flexible, quick way. So the goal is to have all 8 of our brand's customer database roll up into one customer database so that we could actually see, oh, is a Dermalogica customer the same demographic or the same behavior as a Living Proof customer? Or maybe they're not. Maybe they don't have any similarities, but we really want to dig down and to see what that looks like. Once we have this unified database, it'll pull in all the different information. It'll have your e-commerce, it'll have your loyalty, it'll have your point of sale at retail. Hopefully it'll have like literally every single point that that person has now bought at Macy's, has now bought on .com, has bought 5 years ago under her maiden name versus today under her married name. Now she has 2 kids, maybe she has a dog. I mean, we want to know everything about you as long as it's approved and you guys have clicked on, yes, I agree to give you my information. And then once we get there, we can actually create this really great environment where we can cater to your needs and then treat you like a very much an individual human being. That information would get fed into our, I threw it into a box of personalization because we actually don't know what that box looks like as of today. We're testing it out with our data platform, we're testing it out with Klaviyo, but there has to be this engine that helps us identify who those people are and how to best cater to them. Again, I think Klaviyo is a really great stepping stone in doing this because they have kind of like a mini customer database that helps you do that segmentation. It's kind of like a gateway to testing this out and learning on exactly how to do some segmentation. And again, offering all of these tools to the marketing teams so that they can then use all of these tools to really help lift up their campaigns and do a much better job at getting people to open those emails, getting the right number of emails in your mailbox, whether it's the Pottery Barn route or the Hourglass route or some other route. So that's our future state. And that's literally all I want to talk about today. I know that was really quick, but I want to open up for discussions if you guys have any particular questions.
If you guys do have a question, if you wouldn't mind just popping up here to this one, the microphone up here, or we'll pass this one along in the back of the room.
What are the 8 segments that you mentioned?
So right now, so the 8 segments that I mentioned were literally just things that we had made up right now. So we actually don't know what it looks like. So we could have the loyalists, you know, we could, I mean, I think I talked about, yeah, loyalists and the occasional buyers and the adventures and the tough critics. Like those are just, it could be anything. It really depends on your personal category and how it's broken down. So these are the ones I've seen in like the beauty market per se, because you have those hard to convince beauty enthusiasts, or those people who have been using their same shampoo for a few years and it's hard to convince them. So it really depends on each of your industries how that segmentation might break out. But the point is, you need to have your database or tools like Klaviyo to help you really see what those segments might be.
Looking at the brands individually versus an aggregate, what do you think are the most important sort of inflection points or variables for deciding to invest in a CDP?
Very good question. So our 8 brands are wildly different. Even though they seem like they're similar because they're all beauty prestige brands, it really was a hard conversation by brand to convince them that this is something they wanted to do. And truth be told, I went to Ren, and they're a very small brand. They're based in the UK. They don't have the footprint and necessarily like the e-commerce activity that Dermalogica does. And I said, this would be great for you. I gave them the same spiel. I said, this is what you can do with that. It was a hard conversation. They said, look, we have limited resources. We have limited funding. I think we need to invest that money in some of the low-hanging fruits for basic.com. But then when I had that conversation with Dermalogica, much easier conversation because they do have the resources, they do have the funding, and they do have the energy to do it. So I think that if I was an individual brand looking at it, I wouldn't necessarily start with a customer database. Realistically, I would start with Klaviyo as my first step because it's the way to understand, can I segment? Do I know how to segment? Is it working? Do I see revenue uptick? And then once you start to get the hang of segmenting through something like Klaviyo, which is like a CDP 101, then you can start seeing the investment potential for something more robust like assignment data in your customer database platform. We're just lucky that because we're like a collective of 8 brands together, we can leverage a universal contract and be able to have all 8 brands take advantage of one contract, and one mother brand might kind of support the smaller brands as we do this experiment together.
Thank you. Hi. You guys obviously have resellers, right? Everyone from Macy's to CVS. Do you like receive, the customer purchase data like all the way back up, and you can get a view of it in Klaviyo, even if they haven't opted in? And if so, that's awesome. But if not, or like you have like partners that just won't share the data, what do you guys do with that?
So this has been a pain point for us. We do have resellers, Sephora, Ulta, the department stores being all participants. It's a big challenge. So I can speak to Sephora specifically because they are the hardest ones playing ball here. So they do not share customer data. And if anyone has access to your customer information through Sephora, please let me know how you got that. Because I've heard like whispers that you can get that information, we just haven't seen it. Hopefully though, even if we had to pay for it, I'm totally willing to pay for it because that information is so valuable to us. Same thing goes with like the Macy's and the Nordstroms. They don't necessarily offer that information. They only give us by product, by SKU. So it's going to be kind of a balance to figure out all the information we see from a product point of view, and then seeing our e-commerce data where we know our demographics, where we know who they are, and then matching those two together. But hopefully, as this whole data warehouse, data environment really matures, the retailers are gonna know they have that access to that information, and they're gonna know that the wealth of information that they have that they can share with their partners.
Hold on, here we go.
I guess just a follow-up question to that one, because I think it's very relevant that you've got the direct-to-consumer side, but also your B2B wholesale channels. Mm-hmm. Have you found any signals, like as you segment customers, people that might not be buying directly from you, but people that still are likely, that have signals that have proven that they are a customer of yours, whether they're visiting store locators, et cetera, and how have you segmented or still talk to those people versus if you were just to assume they were they had zero interest in shopping directly from you, you might exclude them and not talk to them. have you found like a segment that is clearly buying from other stores and spoken to them in different ways?
So these are the things that we want to see in our experiment. So we've just launched the CDP exercise literally last week. So we really haven't seen anything from it. But one of our hypotheses is if you come to our website, most often not, you're looking for information on the product, and then you buy it at Sephora, or you buy it at Macy's, or you buy it from a reseller, or buy it on Amazon, things like that. But to find the actual information about a product, you tend to go to their website. So that's kind of a signal that we're going to test out to see. We will see people visiting our site and then not necessarily doing anything, and then watching to see how that goes. So primarily what we're trying to do is understand what's the traffic levels, how do we get people onto our website, what is the behavior once you hit our website. And then depending on how our tags go, we could see where they're coming from, where they're going. It really depends on access. But hopefully we'll be able to see those types of signals to really help support some of the retail data that we don't have access to quite yet.
Was there another question? Hey, how's it going? So regarding like customer journey with loyalists, for example, and maybe you could just use one brand as sort of an example, not all 8. Like, how does that customer journey look like for loyalists when you have, these webs? You have like your website, and then you have all these, resellers. I mean, maybe if you could share anything on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so you're right. It really depends on the brand, and loyalists are my favorite because they're just the easiest to do anything with. Let's use Tatcha as an example. Tatcha thinks every customer that visits their site is a loyalist, which is a great attitude to have. But essentially, their journey, it can really be broken down by how active you are. Are you a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day customer? How often do you come to the website? How often do you purchase? What's your AOV of every purchase? And really segment down to the lifetime value. And then you can segment based off of that. So it really depends on how you want to define what that loyalist is. As part of this exercise, and Klaviyo also offers it, it does give you that proposed lifetime value of your customer. And what we're trying to do is obviously like continuously increase that. But another thing we wanted to try, and this is just as an experiment, is say you buy once a year, and it's like that you're that Black Friday customer, but you spend $7,000. That doesn't necessarily mean you're not a loyalist. That just means you're a very particular loyalist. So we still want to be able to segment those people out and call them loyalists in their own regard. So being able to slice and dice, redefine, and really just build our own categories is the exact flexibility we're looking for.
You made reference to having demographic data. So, we're a small company, but we have data on how our customers use the website, what they're clicking on, how often they visit. We have data on their purchases. We can get some data from places like Google and Facebook. And we've done surveys of our customers. But how are you getting, data about demographics and about likes and preferences of your customers, other than watching their purchase patterns of your products?
Good question. So if you have only access to purchase history, you only have their email, and you have really bare bones information, that's not a terrible place to be. For small startups, for companies that just got off the ground, or even people with very basic operations, that is actually quite sufficient to doing segmentation and being very successful at it. If you want to get a little bit crazy and include that demographic information, and I'll be honest, not all of our brands do it. Some of our brands just don't have the capabilities or the wherewithal to be able to find that demographic information. Some people are afraid of it, they don't want it. Others really use like a third-party resource like Nielsen or some other third party that has access to it, has the permission to use it, and they connect it with our existing database to kind of enrich our existing information. So it's quite fragmented, to be honest, within our portfolio, but we do see that it can be helpful, but we don't overkill. Like I referenced, like, do you have a dog? we don't collect that information. It's offered, and I'm sure that some people do need that information, like say you're a pet company or like Petco or something like that. But there is quite a few third parties that you can purchase data from. You just have to be really strategic on what kind of information you need and if it's going to be helpful for you.
Cool. Any final questions? All right. I know there was quite a few questions on segmentation. One thing I did want to point out, if you're looking to get started with segmentation or just to kind of level up your segmentation, we have a great resource on the Klaviyo Help Center called The Building Blocks of Segmentation. It was actually presented last year at Klaviyo Boston, but it's a great resource. I share it with a lot of customers. It's a great way to start getting to this, of just like where to actually begin. So definitely check that out if you have additional questions.
And
Otherwise,
if you have any questions about products, things that I love in our brands, or any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
how about a round of applause?